Hello, I'm a woman who experienced the most ironic betrayal of my 16-year marriage. I always thought family destruction was something that happened to other people, never imagining I'd become the victim of my own husband's greed. But my story took a very unusual turn. When my husband publicly humiliated me, calling me the world's most expensive nanny, in front of his company's board of directors, I thought my life was over. "You've had enough, Evelyn. You're getting confused again," he said, taking my wine glass away while everyone watched. That's when my 75-year-old father-in-law whispered to me, "Don't fight back yet. Just wait. I've been preparing for this moment for 2 years." What happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. The man I thought was a confused elderly father turned out to be my secret ally, documenting every theft, every lie, every betrayal his son had committed. Sometimes the people who seem powerless are actually the most dangerous opponents of all. I hope you learn from my experience that greed and manipulation can come from the people closest to you, but justice can come from the most unexpected places. I hope you find this story as fascinating as it was devastating to live through. If you're hearing this story, tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Before we begin today's story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's get started. The kitchen in Oak Park smells of burnt Earl Grey and regret. Chicago's autumn wind rattles the old window panes like skeletal fingers tapping for entry. The yellow overhead light flickers once, twice, then holds steady, casting harsh shadows across the granite countertops that Mark insisted they needed when his logistics company first turned a profit. Evelyn Vance stands at the sink, her hands submerged in lukewarm dishwater. At 45, she still carries herself with the poise of the marketing executive she used to be. But 16 years of caring for Mark's parents have softened her edges. Her auburn hair, once professionally styled every 6 weeks, now hangs past her shoulders in a simple ponytail. The diamond wedding ring on her finger catches the light as she scrubs the same plate for the 3rd time. The house feels too big today. Too quiet. She reaches for the dish towel and freezes. A white envelope sits on the counter beside Grace's pill organizer. The return address reads, Medicare Administrative Services, in bold blue letters. Evelyn's stomach tightens. She dried her hands slowly, the terry cloth rough against her skin. The envelope wasn't there this morning when she prepared Grace's medication. She remembers sliding the Monday through Sunday compartments across this exact spot, counting out the white pills for nausea, the blue ones for pain. The tiny yellow tablets that help Grace sleep through the worst of the chemotherapy side effects. Evelyn picks up the envelope. Her name appears in the address window, but the weight feels wrong. Too heavy for a standard insurance notice. She slides her finger under the flap and tears it open with a crisp sound that echoes in the empty kitchen. Inside, a single sheet of paper. An explanation of benefits. Her eyes scan the medical codes, the dates, the provider information. Then she sees the number that makes her breath catch: $5,000. The charge is for a private clinic she's never heard of. Advanced Pain Management of Chicago. The date matches the Thursday Grace had her chemotherapy session at Northwestern Memorial. Evelyn remembers that day clearly because Grace had been particularly weak afterward. She'd helped her mother-in-law from the car to the house, supporting most of her weight as they climbed the front steps. Grace hadn't mentioned visiting another clinic. Evelyn sets the paper on the counter and stares at it. The fluorescent light overhead hums quietly. Outside, a neighbor's dog barks twice, then stops. The numbers on the EOB seem to grow larger as she looks at them. $5,000 for services rendered. Patient Grace Margaret Vance. Insurance paid $0. Patient responsibility $5,000. But Grace's cancer treatment is fully covered. Arthur made sure of that when he updated their insurance policy last year. They'd sat in his study while he explained every detail, his weathered hands tracing the coverage limits with a careful finger. The front door slams shut. Heavy footsteps cross the hardwood floor of the entryway. Mark's briefcase hits the kitchen table with a sharp thud that makes Evelyn jump. The sound bounces off the walls and seems to hang in the air. "Why are you holding that?" His voice is tired but sharp. Evelyn turns to face her husband. Mark still wears his navy suit from the office, his tie loosened but not removed. At 47, he carries himself with the authority of someone who expects to be obeyed. His dark hair is graying at the temples, and his blue eyes hold the same coldness they've carried for months now. It came in today's mail. Evelyn holds up the EOB. I don't understand this charge. Mark moves across the kitchen in 3 quick strides and takes the paper from her hands. He doesn't look at it. Instead, he folds it in half and slides it into his jacket pocket. It's a billing error. These places double charge all the time. His phone buzzes, and he pulls it from his pocket. The screen lights up with a notification. Evelyn catches a glimpse of the name, S.K., before Mark tilts the phone away from her. But Grace never mentioned. My mother has cancer, Evelyn. She's not going to remember every doctor she sees. Mark's fingers move quickly across his phone screen. Your job is to make sure she takes her medication, not to play detective with the insurance paperwork. The words hit like a slap. Evelyn feels her cheeks flush. She turns back to the sink and picks up another dish, even though the rack is already full. The water has gone cold. I just want to make sure we're not being charged for something she didn't receive. Mark doesn't respond. He's typing something on his phone, his thumbs moving with urgent precision. Another message appears, and Evelyn sees him smile slightly. It's not the smile he used to give her. This one is secretive, satisfied in a way that makes her stomach twist. I need to make some calls. Mark pockets his phone and picks up his briefcase. Can you keep it down? This is important. He heads toward his home office, his footsteps heavy on the kitchen tiles. The door clicks shut behind him, followed immediately by the soft sound of the lock turning. Evelyn has been married to Mark for 16 years, but she's only heard that lock used 3 times. Once when he was negotiating a major contract. Once during his father's health scare 2 years ago. And now. She sets the dish in the rack and dries her hands again. The kitchen feels smaller suddenly, as if the walls have moved closer while she wasn't looking. The autumn wind picks up outside, sending a handful of brown leaves skittering across the back deck. Grace's pill organizer sits on the counter beside the coffee maker. 7 compartments, each labeled with a day of the week. Monday through Thursday are empty. Friday through Sunday still contain their careful arrangements of white, blue, and yellow pills. Evelyn slides the organizer toward her and pops open Friday's compartment. Everything is there. The anti-nausea medication Grace takes with breakfast. The pain pills she needs in the afternoon. The sleep aid that helps her rest through the night sweats that come with the chemotherapy. But something feels different about the arrangement. The pills seem to have been moved, disturbed somehow. Evelyn has been organizing Grace's medication for 8 months, ever since the cancer diagnosis. She has a system. The white pills go on the left, blue in the middle, yellow on the right. It's a small detail, but routines matter when you're caring for someone who's fighting for their life. Today, the yellow pills are on the left. From Mark's office comes the sound of his voice, muffled but urgent. She can't make out the words, but the tone is one she recognizes. It's the voice he uses when he's trying to convince someone to do something they don't want to do. She's heard him use it with suppliers, with employees, with his father when Arthur questions one of his decisions. She's never heard him use it with her, but then again, she's never questioned him about missing money before. Evelyn walks to the window above the sink and looks out at the backyard. The oak tree that gives Oak Park its name stands in the center of the lawn, its branches nearly bare now. Arthur planted that tree when Mark was a boy, back when the Vance family was just getting started in the logistics business. Now the tree towers over the house, its trunk thick enough that she can't wrap her arms around it. A memory surfaces unexpectedly. Last month, when Grace was having a particularly bad day with the chemotherapy, Evelyn had called Mark at the office to ask if he could come home early. Grace was asking for him, had been calling his name in her sleep. I can't leave right now, he'd said. We're in the middle of quarterly reviews. But when Evelyn had driven Grace to her afternoon appointment, she'd seen Mark's car in the parking lot of the Peninsula Hotel downtown. She'd mentioned it when he came home that evening, asked if his meeting had been moved there. You must have seen someone else's car, he'd said without looking up from his phone. Silver SUVs all look the same. Now, standing in the kitchen with the EOB's weight still heavy in her mind, Evelyn wonders if she really had made a mistake. The car had been parked near the hotel's main entrance, in a spot that would have cost $40 for 2 hours. Mark complains when she spends $20 on groceries they don't absolutely need. Behind her, Mark's voice rises slightly, then drops again. She hears him laugh, a sound she remembers from their early years together. When he used to laugh with her instead of at her. When he used to ask about her day instead of telling her how she should have spent it. The refrigerator hums to life, its motor kicking in with a low vibration that travels through the kitchen floor. Evelyn opens the freezer and pulls out a bag of frozen vegetables for dinner. Grace has been asking for green beans, one of the few foods that doesn't make her nauseated anymore. As she closes the freezer door, her reflection appears in the stainless steel surface. Distorted but recognizable. Her face looks tired, older than 45. There are lines around her eyes that weren't there before Grace got sick. Her skin has lost the healthy glow that came from regular exercise and 8 hours of sleep. When was the last time she'd done something for herself? Really for herself. Not for Grace or Arthur or Mark or the house or the endless list of responsibilities that fills her days? She can't remember. The office door opens, and Mark emerges with his phone pressed to his ear. He walks past the kitchen without looking at her, heading toward the front door. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he says into the phone. No, she won't be a problem. She's focused on other things right now. The front door opens and closes. Through the window, Evelyn watches Mark's silver SUV pull out of the driveway and disappear down the tree-lined street. She's focused on other things. As if caring for his dying mother is some sort of hobby she picked up to pass the time. Evelyn returns to the EOB in her mind, trying to make sense of the details. Grace had been scheduled for chemotherapy at 10 a.m. on Thursday. The treatment typically takes 3 hours, followed by a recovery period. They'd been home by 4 p.m. because Evelyn remembers starting dinner while Grace rested in the living room. When would Grace have had time to visit another clinic? And why wouldn't she have mentioned it? Unless she hadn't known she was there. The thought comes unbidden and settles in Evelyn's stomach like a stone. She pushes it away, but it returns immediately, stronger than before. She walks to the phone on the wall beside the refrigerator and dials the number for Advanced Pain Management of Chicago. The phone rings 4 times before a recorded message picks up. "You have reached Advanced Pain Management. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. If this is a medical emergency, please hang up and dial 911. Evelyn hangs up and looks at the clock. 7:30 p.m. Too late to reach anyone tonight. Tomorrow, she tells herself. Tomorrow she'll call during business hours and ask about the charge. There has to be a logical explanation. A billing error, like Mark said. These things happen in the medical world all the time. But as she begins preparing dinner, moving automatically through the familiar motions of cooking. A question keeps circling through her mind. If it's just a billing error, why did Mark seem so eager to make it disappear? The green beans steam in their pot, filling the kitchen with the smell of summer vegetables in the middle of autumn. Outside, the wind continues to rattle the windows, and the bare branches of Arthur's oak tree scrape against each other with a sound like whispered warnings. The Social Security envelope arrives on a Tuesday morning, addressed to a P.O. box downtown instead of their Oak Park home. Evelyn finds it wedged between grocery store circulars and credit card offers, the government seal barely visible beneath a pizza delivery flyer. She's never seen this P.O. box number before. Box 847, Chicago Main Post Office. The return address shows the Social Security Administration, and Arthur's name appears in the recipient field through the plastic window. But Arthur's mail comes to the house. It always has. Evelyn sets her coffee cup on the granite counter and tears open the envelope. Inside, a benefit statement showing a direct deposit of $2,847 into an account she doesn't recognize. The routing number starts with digits she's never seen on any of their bank statements. Arthur's monthly Social Security payment, redirected somewhere else entirely. Her hands shake as she reads the fine print. The change took effect 3 weeks ago. Authorized by the account holder's designated power of attorney. The coffee tastes bitter suddenly. Evelyn sets the cup down and walks toward the sunroom where Arthur spends most of his mornings. The hardwood floors creak under her feet, the same boards that have groaned with this rhythm for 30 years. Mark grew up in this house, playing in these hallways while Arthur built his logistics empire from a single delivery truck. She finds Arthur in his favorite chair, a burgundy leather recliner positioned to catch the morning light. At 75, he still has the broad shoulders of a man who once loaded freight by hand, but his movements have become careful, deliberate. His silver hair is combed neatly to one side, and he wears the same wool cardigan he's owned for a decade. He's trying to drink from a glass of water, but his hand trembles. The condensation drips steadily onto his cardigan, leaving dark spots on the gray wool. He doesn't seem to notice. "Arthur?" Evelyn's voice comes out softer than she intended. "How are you feeling this morning?" He looks up, and for a moment, his pale blue eyes seem confused. Then recognition flickers, and he smiles. "Evelyn, dear, I was just thinking about the old days. When Mark was small, he used to sit right here with me every morning before school. We'd watch the birds in that oak tree." Evelyn follows his gaze through the wall of windows that face the backyard. The oak tree stands bare now, its branches black against the gray October sky. A cardinal lands on one of the lower branches, a bright red spot against the darkness. "That's a lovely memory." She moves closer, noticing a stack of papers on the small table beside his chair. "Arthur, can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. Your Social Security payment, has Mark talked to you about changing where it's deposited?" Arthur's expression shifts slightly. The smile fades, replaced by something that looks like worry. He sets his water glass down with unsteady hands, the base clicking against the wooden table. "He said there were problems with the bank. Something about fees eating up the money." Arthur's voice drops to barely above a whisper. "He showed me papers. Said this new account would be better for taxes." Evelyn's chest tightens. Arthur has banked at First National of Oak Park for 40 years. She's never heard him mention fees, and their checking account has always maintained a balance high enough to waive any service charges. "Do you remember signing anything recently? Any bank documents?" Arthur looks toward the stack of papers beside his chair. The top document faces down, but Evelyn can see the corner of an official-looking letterhead. He reaches for it with trembling fingers, then stops. "Mark said I shouldn't worry about the details anymore. Said I should focus on enjoying my retirement." His voice carries a note of confusion that breaks Evelyn's heart. "But I built this company from nothing, Evelyn. I remember every contract, every deal. When did I become too old to understand my own money?" Without waiting for permission, Evelyn gently lifts the top paper from the stack. It's a power of attorney document, dated 2 weeks ago. Arthur's signature appears at the bottom in handwriting that looks shaky and uncertain. Nothing like the confident script she remembers from his business correspondence. The document grants Mark complete control over Arthur's financial affairs, including bank accounts, investments, and property decisions. A paragraph near the bottom mentions cognitive decline requiring assistance with financial management. Arthur has never shown signs of cognitive decline. Yesterday, he helped her balance Grace's medication schedule and caught an error she'd made with the timing. Last week, he walked her through the company's quarterly reports, explaining complex logistics calculations with perfect clarity. "Arthur, when you signed this, do you remember feeling pressured? Did anyone rush you?" He looks at her with eyes that suddenly seem much older than 75. "Mark said it was just a precaution. In case something happened to me." "But Evelyn," he leans forward, lowering his voice even further. "I don't feel confused about money. I know exactly what I have and where it should go." The admission hangs between them like a confession. Outside, the cardinal takes flight, its red wings disappearing into the gray morning. Evelyn sits on the ottoman beside Arthur's chair, close enough to smell his cologne, the same woody scent he's worn for as long as she's known him. Her mind races through the implications. If Mark is redirecting Arthur's Social Security payments without a legitimate reason, what else might he be moving? "Has Mark talked to you about your will recently? Or Grace's medical expenses?" Arthur's hand finds hers, his grip surprisingly strong. "He's been asking a lot of questions about the business accounts. Says he needs to understand everything for tax planning." His voice drops to a whisper. "But tax season isn't for 4 months." A sound from the kitchen interrupts them, the distinctive buzz of the garage door opening. Mark's home early, which almost never happens during the week. Evelyn glances at the clock on the mantel. 11:30 a.m. He left for the office less than 2 hours ago. "Arthur, I need you to do something for me." Evelyn speaks quickly, keeping her voice low. Don't sign anything else without calling me first. Nothing, even if Mark says it's urgent. Arthur nods, but his expression shows more fear than understanding. Is something wrong, dear? Before Evelyn can answer, footsteps cross the kitchen floor. She slides the power of attorney document back onto the stack, her heart hammering against her ribs. Mark appears in the doorway between the kitchen and sunroom, still wearing his suit jacket. His dark hair looks windblown, and there's a slight flush in his cheeks as if he's been walking quickly. What are you two talking about? His tone is casual, but his eyes move between Evelyn and Arthur with sharp attention. Just discussing the weather, Evelyn says. Arthur was watching the birds. Dad, you look tired. Maybe you should rest. Mark walks over to Arthur's chair and places a hand on his father's shoulder. The gesture looks caring, but Evelyn notices how Mark's fingers press into the fabric of the cardigan. You've been pushing yourself too hard lately. I feel fine, son. Evelyn and I were having a nice chat. About what? The question comes too quickly, with too much interest. Evelyn feels Mark's attention focus on her like a spotlight. Family memories, she says. Arthur was telling me about when you were little. Mark's expression relaxes slightly, but his hand remains on Arthur's shoulder. Those were good times. Simpler times. He looks directly at Evelyn. Speaking of simple, I forgot some files I need for this afternoon's meeting. I'll be in my office for a few minutes. He disappears back toward the kitchen, and moments later, they hear the familiar click of his office door locking. Arthur looks up at Evelyn with an expression that says everything words cannot. 20 minutes later, Mark emerges with a manila folder tucked under his arm. He stops in the sunroom doorway again. Dad, I'll need you to come into the office tomorrow morning. Some insurance paperwork for Mom's treatment. Nothing complicated, but it needs your signature. What kind of paperwork? Evelyn asks before Arthur can respond. Mark's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. Medical authorizations, privacy waivers for the doctors to share information with the family. His tone suggests the conversation is over. Dad, plan on being there around 10. I can drive him, Evelyn offers. That won't be necessary. I'll pick him up. After Mark leaves, Arthur sits quietly for several minutes. Finally, he speaks without looking at Evelyn. I built this company for my family. For Mark, for his children someday, for Grace. His voice carries the weight of 7 decades of hard work. But I never built it to be stolen from me while I'm still alive. The cardinal returns to the oak tree, joined now by its mate. They perch side by side on the same branch, 2 bright spots of color against the November gloom. That evening, after Grace has taken her medication and settled into bed, Evelyn sits at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and her laptop. She opens a new web browser and types, Power of Attorney Elder Abuse Illinois, into the search bar. The results fill her screen with information she wishes she didn't need to know. Warning signs of financial exploitation. Legal protections for elderly adults. Phone numbers for reporting suspected abuse. One article mentions that family members are responsible for 90% of elder financial abuse cases. The most common perpetrators are adult children who have gained access to their parents' finances. Evelyn reads until her eyes burn, memorizing phone numbers and legal terms that feel like weapons she might need to use. Outside, the wind picks up again, rattling the windows with increasing urgency. In the morning, she will call Advanced Pain Management and ask about Grace's mysterious appointment. She will research the bank account where Arthur's Social Security payments are being deposited. She will find a way to protect the people she loves from the person she used to trust most in the world. But tonight, she sits in the kitchen where this all started, listening to the wind and watching her reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back at her seems like a stranger, older, more tired, but somehow more determined than the person who found that first EOB 3 days ago. Tomorrow, she tells herself, she will start asking the questions that need answers. Even if those answers destroy everything she thought she knew about her marriage. The tea grows cold in her cup as she plans her investigation, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wails through the Chicago night. The Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse in downtown Chicago pulses with the energy of money and power. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across dark wood paneling, and the air carries the rich scent of aged beef and expensive wine. Evelyn adjusts her black dress, the one Mark insisted she wear because it doesn't make her look as tired, and follows the hostess toward the private dining room in the back. The Vance Logistics Board of Directors always holds their November meeting here, followed by an early Thanksgiving dinner. A tradition Arthur started 20 years ago when the company went public. Tonight, 12 of Chicago's most influential business leaders sit around a mahogany table that costs more than most people's cars. Evelyn takes her seat beside Mark, the burgundy leather chair soft against her back. To her right, Grace sits quietly, her silk scarf artfully arranged to hide the port where her chemotherapy treatments are administered. Despite the cancer, Grace has insisted on attending tonight. "I won't let this disease steal any more of my life than necessary," she'd said while Evelyn helped her with her makeup. Mark stands, tapping his wine glass with a silver knife. The crystal chimes through the room, cutting through conversations about stock prices and quarterly projections. All eyes turn toward him as he clears his throat. "Before we begin our meal, I'd like to make a toast." His voice carries the practiced confidence of a man who expects to be heard. "To family, to loyalty, and to the people who keep our lives running smoothly." Evelyn feels a flutter of warmth in her chest. After the tension of the past week, maybe tonight will mark a return to better times. Maybe they can work through whatever problems have been building between them. Mark's blue eyes find hers across the table, and he smiles. But there's something in that smile that makes her stomach clench. "To my wife, the world's most expensive nanny." The words hit like a physical blow. Evelyn's wine glass freezes halfway to her lips as scattered laughter ripples around the table. Some of the board members shift uncomfortably in their seats, but others, particularly the younger executives Mark has been cultivating, grin and raise their glasses. The room tilts slightly. Evelyn grips the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white against the dark wood. The most expensive nanny. As if 16 years of marriage, of supporting his career, of caring for his dying mother, amount to nothing more than hired help. She used to run marketing campaigns that brought in millions, Mark continues, his tone light and conversational. Now she runs the dishwasher when she remembers to start it. More laughter, louder this time. "Last week, I had to remind her 3 times to pick up Dad's prescription." The mind goes, "You know? Happens to the best of us." Evelyn's face burns. Every person at this table knows her professional history. She ran the campaign that landed Vance Logistics its first Fortune 500 contract. She developed the brand strategy that tripled their market share in 5 years. She left her career to care for his parents when Grace got sick, because family came first. She reaches for her wine glass, needing something to do with her hands, but Mark moves it just out of her reach. "Easy there," he says with a patronizing chuckle. "You've had enough. We don't want another incident like last month." There was no incident last month. Evelyn rarely drinks more than 1 glass of wine, and everyone at this table knows it. But Mark's words plant doubt, create a story that explains away anything she might say tonight. If she protests, she'll look defensive, unstable. If she stays quiet, she confirms his narrative. The trap closes around her with surgical precision. "Mark," Arthur's voice cuts through the laughter. His tone carries a warning that only family members would recognize. "Perhaps we should." "Dad, please. Let me finish." Mark's smile never wavers, but steel enters his voice. "I was just explaining how grateful we are for Evelyn's transition into caregiving. It's not easy going from the boardroom to the bedroom, from managing teams to managing medications." Grace's hand finds Evelyn's under the table, squeezing gently. The gesture offers comfort, but it also confirms what Evelyn fears most, that Grace knows exactly what's happening and feels powerless to stop it. Evelyn stands abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. The sound echoes through the suddenly quiet room. Every face turns toward her, some curious, others embarrassed by the obvious tension. "Excuse me," she manages, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I need some air." She walks toward the restroom, her heels clicking against marble floors that seem to stretch endlessly ahead of her. Behind her, she hears Mark's voice, smooth and concerned. "See what I mean? The stress of caregiving really takes its toll." The ladies' room offers sanctuary with its soft lighting and marble countertops. Evelyn grips the edge of the sink and stares at her reflection. Her face is flushed, her eyes too bright. She looks exactly like someone who might be having a breakdown, which is precisely what Mark intended. When did he become so cruel? When did the man who once brought her coffee every morning transform into someone who would humiliate her in front of colleagues? The change hadn't happened overnight. It had been gradual, subtle, like water slowly wearing away stone. Evelyn splashes cold water on her wrists, a trick her mother taught her for calming nerves. The icy shock helps clear her head. She needs to get through the rest of this dinner. She needs to be strong for Grace, who shouldn't have to witness her son destroying his marriage while she fights for her life. But as she turns to leave, voices from the main dining room carry through the partially open door. Mark's voice, and another she recognizes as Sarah Kim, the young logistics coordinator who joined the company 6 months ago. Worry about Evelyn figuring anything out? She's focused on my mother's medications. Keeps herself busy counting pills and organizing doctor appointments. Mark's voice is lower now, intimate. Besides, even if she suspected something, who would believe her? She's been isolated for years. No career, no independence. Where would she go? What about your father? He's still sharp. For now. But age catches up with everyone. And I have power of attorney now. Evelyn freezes, her hand on the door handle. Through the crack, she can see Mark and Sarah standing near the windows that overlook the Chicago River. Sarah wears a red dress that cost more than Evelyn's monthly grocery budget, and around her neck glints a necklace that bears the Vance family crest. A necklace that belonged to Mark's grandmother. A necklace Arthur gave to Grace on their wedding day, with the understanding that it would someday go to Mark's wife. It's beautiful, Sarah says, touching the pendant. Are you sure she won't notice it's gone? Evelyn doesn't know what jewelry my mother owns anymore. She's too busy playing nurse to pay attention to anything else. Mark moves closer to Sarah, his hand resting on her lower back. After Mom passes, it'll be easy to say Grace wanted her to have it. The casual cruelty of his words hits Evelyn like a physical blow. He's planning Grace's death as if it's already happened, dividing up her possessions while she sits in the next room fighting to survive each day. Evelyn stumbles backward from the door, her heel catching on the marble threshold. She catches herself against the wall, her heart pounding so hard she's certain everyone in the restaurant can hear it. Mark isn't just having an affair. He's systematically dismantling his family's legacy while they trust him to protect it. The redirected Social Security payments, the power of attorney document, the mysterious medical charges, they're all part of something larger, more calculated than she imagined. She forces herself to return to the dining room, walking past Mark and Sarah as if she heard nothing. Grace looks up as she sits down, concern evident in her pale blue eyes. Are you all right, dear? Just needed a moment, Evelyn murmurs, accepting the glass of water Arthur slides toward her. The dinner continues around her, conversations flowing about business prospects and holiday plans. Evelyn cuts her steak into small pieces, moves food around her plate, responds to questions with appropriate nods and smiles. But inside, her mind races through everything she's learned in the past week. Mark has access to Arthur's finances. He's redirecting payments to accounts Grace and Arthur don't know about. He's convinced Arthur to sign legal documents under false pretenses. And he's so confident in his control over the situation that he's flaunting his girlfriend in front of his dying mother. As coffee and dessert arrive, Evelyn makes her decision. Tomorrow, she will call Advanced Pain Management and demand answers about Grace's treatment. She will visit the bank and ask about the mysterious account receiving Arthur's Social Security payments. She will research divorce attorneys and elder abuse hotlines. Tonight was meant to break her, to reduce her to the role of expensive nanny that Mark assigned her. Instead, it has shown her exactly who her husband really is, and what she needs to do to protect the people she loves. Across the table, Mark raises his glass in another toast, this one to family values and the bonds that hold us together. The irony is so sharp it could cut glass. Evelyn raises her water glass and meets his gaze directly. For the first time in months, she doesn't look away first. Something in her expression must surprise him, because his confident smile falters for just a moment. Good, she thinks. Let him wonder what changed tonight. The ride home is quiet, Grace dozing against the passenger window while Arthur stares out at the city lights. In the backseat, Evelyn plans her investigation, mapping out each step she'll need to take to uncover the full extent of Mark's betrayal. By the time they reach Oak Park, she has a strategy. By tomorrow night, she'll have answers. And by the end of the week, she'll know whether her marriage can be saved or if she needs to destroy it to save his family. The oak tree in their backyard stands silhouetted against the night sky, its bare branches reaching toward stars that seem impossibly far away. But stars, Evelyn remembers, are actually closer than they appear. And sometimes the light they cast is strong enough to illuminate even the darkest truths. The basement laundry room smells of bleach and forgotten corners. Evelyn loads Grace's linens into the washing machine, soft cotton sheets that have been washed so many times they feel like silk against the skin. Upstairs, Grace naps in the sunroom, exhausted from this morning's chemotherapy session. The treatment is getting harder on her body, each round leaving her weaker than the last. Evelyn measures detergent with mechanical precision, her mind still churning from last night's dinner. The image of Sarah wearing Grace's necklace burns in her memory like acid. The casual way Mark discussed his mother's death, as if it were a business transaction requiring advance planning. She closes the washing machine lid and hits the start button. Water rushes into the machine with a whooshing sound that echoes off the concrete walls. The basement has always felt separate from the rest of the house, cooler, quieter, removed from the carefully maintained surfaces upstairs. As she turns to leave, something catches her eye. Mark's gym bag sits tucked behind the old furnace, partially hidden by a stack of storage boxes. He usually keeps it in his car or the mudroom upstairs. What's it doing down here? Evelyn glances toward the basement stairs, listening for movement above. The house is quiet except for the hum of the washing machine and the distant murmur of the television where Arthur watches his afternoon news program. She kneels beside the gym bag and unzips it slowly, the metal teeth separating with tiny clicking sounds. Inside, she expects to find workout clothes and water bottles. Instead, her fingers touch paper. The first document makes her breath catch. Sunset Manor Assisted Living, in bold letters across the top, followed by an address in a part of Chicago she doesn't recognize. The contract is filled out in Mark's careful handwriting, with spaces for two residents, Arthur Vance and Grace Vance. Evelyn's hands shake as she reads the details. A shared room in the facility's economical care wing. Monthly fees of $3,200, barely enough to cover basic housing and meals, with no provision for Grace's ongoing medical needs. The contract is already signed by Mark as Arthur's power of attorney, dated for next month. She's visited Sunset Manor before, as part of her research when Grace first got sick. The facility is 40 minutes from Oak Park, in a neighborhood where emergency sirens wail through the night. The building reeks of industrial disinfectant and overcooked food. Many of the residents sit in wheelchairs in the hallway, staring at nothing, forgotten by families who visit less and less frequently. Grace would die there within weeks. Not from cancer, but from despair. Behind the assisted living contract, Evelyn finds more documents. A mortgage modification notice showing that Mark has refinanced their Oak Park home, increasing the loan amount by $400,000. The extra money has been distributed to accounts she doesn't recognize, routed through what appears to be a personal investment company. Her marriage is being liquidated like a failed business. The next paper hits even harder. A bank statement from Mark's personal account, showing regular transfers of $8,000 every 2 weeks. The memo line reads, "Family care stipend." But Evelyn has never received a family care stipend. She manages Grace and Arthur's daily needs with her own savings account, which now holds exactly $42. Mark has been paying himself for her caregiving work while telling her the family couldn't afford to compensate her efforts. At the bottom of the bag, wrapped in a plastic sleeve, she finds Arthur's original will. The document that Arthur spent months crafting with his attorney, making careful provisions for Grace's medical care, for Mark's future leadership of the company. For Evelyn's security as a daughter-in-law who sacrificed her career for family. This version leaves the family home to Evelyn and Grace, ensuring they'll never be homeless. It establishes a medical trust that will cover any treatment Grace needs for the rest of her life. It transitions company control to Mark gradually, with safeguards to protect employees and prevent reckless decisions. But this isn't the will Arthur signed last month. The document Mark convinced him to update, for tax purposes, completely removes Evelyn from inheritance consideration and places all assets under Mark's immediate control. Evelyn sinks onto the cold concrete floor, surrounded by evidence of her husband's systematic dismantling of his family's security. The fluorescent light above flickers intermittently, casting unsteady shadows across the basement walls. How long has he been planning this? The documents suggest months of preparation, maybe longer. While she counted Grace's pills and drove Arthur to doctor appointments, Mark was arranging their disposal like unwanted furniture. The washing machine shifts into its spin cycle, vibrating against the basement floor. The sound penetrates Evelyn's shock, reminding her that she's holding stolen documents in a house where Mark could return at any moment. She photographs each page with her phone, her hands shaking so badly that several pictures come out blurred. She has to steady her wrists against her knees to get clear images of the bank statements and mortgage papers. As she refolds the documents and places them back in the gym bag, her fingers brush against something else. A jewelry box, small and velvet covered. Inside, she finds Grace's wedding ring, the one Grace stopped wearing when her fingers became too swollen from chemotherapy side effects. The ring Grace asked Evelyn to keep safe until she felt better. The ring Mark told Evelyn he'd put in the bedroom safe for security. Instead, he's hidden it in the basement like evidence of a crime. Planning, perhaps, to claim it disappeared during Grace's illness. Another asset redirected from its rightful owner. Evelyn holds the ring up to the flickering light, watching the diamonds catch and throw tiny rainbows across the concrete walls. Grace wore this ring for 48 years, through building a business empire, raising a son, surviving 2 miscarriages, and now fighting cancer. It represents everything Grace has given to her family, everything she's sacrificed and endured. And Mark is stealing it while she trusts him to protect her legacy. The basement stairs creak. Footsteps cross the kitchen floor above, heavy and familiar. Mark's home early again, which has become a pattern this week. Evelyn zips the gym bag quickly and slides it back behind the furnace, her heart hammering against her ribs. She grabs a basket of clean towels from the dryer and forces herself to climb the basement stairs at a normal pace. Her legs feel unsteady, but she manages to reach the kitchen just as Mark appears in the doorway. "What were you doing down there?" His eyes move to the laundry basket, then back to her face with sharp attention. "Washing Grace's sheets. She had a difficult night." Evelyn's voice sounds steady, which surprises her. "How was your afternoon meeting?" "Productive." Mark loosens his tie and hangs his jacket on the back of a kitchen chair. "We're implementing some new cost-saving measures. Streamlining operations. Streamlining operations. Like moving his sick mother to a substandard nursing home to free up money for his girlfriend's lifestyle." "That sounds challenging," Evelyn manages. Mark opens the refrigerator and pulls out a beer, twisting off the cap with unnecessary force. Change is never easy, but sometimes you have to make hard choices for the good of everyone involved. The words carry a weight that makes Evelyn's skin crawl. He's not just talking about business decisions. Speaking of changes, Mark continues, taking a long drink from his beer. "I've been thinking about Mom's care. The treatments are getting more expensive, and frankly, they're not working as well as we hoped." Evelyn's mouth goes dry. The oncologist said the latest scans showed some improvement. Minimal improvement, at great cost. Mark leans against the counter, his posture casual, but his eyes calculating. "I think it might be time to consider other options. More comfortable options." "Like what?" "Hospice care. Professional facilities designed for end-of-life comfort." He says it gently, reasonably, as if he's genuinely concerned about Grace's quality of life. "There's a place that specializes in cancer patients. Very peaceful, very caring." Sunset Manor is neither peaceful nor caring, but Evelyn can't reveal that she knows what he's planning. Grace isn't ready for hospice. She's still fighting. Fighting isn't the same as winning, Evelyn. Mark's tone carries a note of condescension that makes her want to scream. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let go. To stop putting her through treatments that are making her suffer. Grace's treatments aren't making her suffer. Mark's financial manipulations are making her suffer. The stress of watching her family's security disappear while she's too weak to fight back, that's what's killing her spirit. "I think Grace should be part of any decision about her care," Evelyn says carefully. "Of course she should. But we also need to be realistic about her state of mind. The medications she's taking can affect judgment. That's why families sometimes need to make difficult decisions on behalf of their loved ones. Another trap. If Grace agrees to hospice care, Mark will claim she made an informed decision. If she refuses, he'll use her medication-impaired judgment as justification for overruling her wishes. The kitchen feels smaller suddenly, as if the walls have moved closer while they talked. Evelyn clutches the laundry basket tighter, using it as a shield between herself and the man she no longer recognizes as her husband. I should get these towels put away, she says. Grace might need fresh ones for her evening shower. Mark nods and returns to his beer, but Evelyn feels his eyes follow her as she leaves the kitchen. Upstairs, she finds Grace awake in the sunroom, staring out at the oak tree where two cardinals have built a nest. How are you feeling? Evelyn asks, setting the towels on a nearby chair. Tired, Grace admits, but not ready to give up. She looks at Evelyn with eyes that are still sharp despite the illness. Mark mentioned something about hospice yesterday. I told him I'm not finished fighting yet. Relief floods through Evelyn's chest. Grace, still determined, still aware of what's happening around her. Good. You fight as long as you want to fight. Grace reaches for Evelyn's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Promise me something, dear. If anything happens to me, if I'm not able to speak for myself, promise you'll make sure Arthur is taken care of. Promise me Mark won't put him someplace awful. The promise Grace is asking for requires Evelyn to stand up to her husband in ways she's never done before. It requires her to challenge a man who controls their finances, their home, their future. A man who's proven himself willing to steal from his dying mother. But looking at Grace's face, seeing the love and worry there for Arthur, Evelyn knows she has no choice. I promise, she whispers. Grace squeezes her hand once more, then closes her eyes. Within minutes, she's asleep again, her breathing peaceful despite everything that threatens the sanctuary Mark is supposed to protect. That evening, after Arthur and Grace have gone to bed, Evelyn sits in her car in the driveway with her phone and the photographs she took in the basement. One by one, she forwards the images to an email account Mark doesn't know about, one she created years ago for work projects and never deleted. Tomorrow, she will call every number she researched about elder abuse. She will visit attorneys who specialize in protecting seniors from family exploitation. She will begin building a case to save Grace and Arthur from the son they trust completely. Tonight, she sits in the darkness outside the house where she's lived for 16 years, planning to destroy her marriage in order to save her family. The oak tree stands silhouetted against the winter sky, its bare branches reaching toward stars that seem impossibly distant. But even dying trees, Evelyn knows, can survive the harshest winters if their roots run deep enough. Grace and Arthur's roots run deeper than Mark realizes. And Evelyn is going to make sure those roots hold. The memory comes without warning, triggered by the weight of Arthur's vintage Parker pen in her hand. Evelyn sits on her bedroom floor at 2 a.m., surrounded by printed photographs of the documents from Mark's gym bag, and suddenly she's 29 years old again. Standing in Arthur's office on a rainy Tuesday in 2010. The office smelled of leather and expensive cigars, with built-in bookcases that held first edition business. Texts and family photographs spanning 3 generations. Arthur sat behind a mahogany desk that had belonged to his father, studying the crisis management proposal Evelyn had worked on for 18 straight hours. Vance Logistics had been facing a public relations disaster. A delivery truck accident had injured 3 people, and the media was painting the company as reckless, more concerned with profits than public safety. The local news had found an ex-employee willing to claim the company cut corners on vehicle maintenance to save money. The story wasn't true, but truth and perception are different animals in the modern world. This is brilliant work, Arthur had said, setting down her proposal and removing his reading glasses. You've turned a potential catastrophe into an opportunity to showcase our commitment to safety. Evelyn remembered the pride that bloomed in her chest. She'd developed a comprehensive strategy that included voluntary safety inspections beyond industry requirements, partnership with local emergency services for driver training, and a community fund for traffic safety education. The best defense against criticism, she'd explained, is to exceed expectations before anyone asks you to. Arthur had stood and walked to the window that overlooked the company's main dispatch facility. 3 stories below, dozens of trucks bearing the Vance logo prepared for their daily routes. Each vehicle represented jobs, families, communities connected by the network Arthur had built from a single delivery truck 30 years earlier. "Integrity isn't a strategy, Evelyn," he'd said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in business. "It's an anchor. When storms come, and they always come, it's the thing that keeps you from drifting into dangerous waters." He'd opened his desk drawer and pulled out the Parker pen, its gold surface gleaming under the office lights. The pen had been a gift from his father when Arthur made his first million, engraved with a simple inscription, "Build something that lasts." "I want you to have this," he'd said, placing it in her hands. "Not because of the campaign you wrote, but because you understand what this company really is. We're not moving packages, Evelyn. We're moving trust. Every delivery we make is someone's faith in our promise to get it right." The pen had felt heavier than it looked, substantial in a way that modern pens never managed. Real gold, real craftsmanship, built to last generations. "Thank you," she'd whispered, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Thank me by never forgetting what I'm about to tell you." Arthur's grip on her shoulder had been firm, warm, paternal. "This company will outlive me. It has to. Too many families depend on what we've built here. Promise me that if you ever see someone trying to tear it down from inside or outside, you'll fight for what's right." She'd promised without hesitation, young enough to believe that right and wrong were clearly defined, that good people always won in the end. Now, 15 years later, she understands that Arthur wasn't just talking about the company. He was talking about his family, his legacy, his dying wife. He was asking her to protect what mattered most, even if it meant fighting his own son. The memory fades as Evelyn refocuses on the present. The Parker pen rests beside printed copies of bank statements that prove Mark's theft. Arthur's words echo in her mind. "Promise me that if you ever see someone trying to tear it down from inside or outside, you'll fight for what's right." She picks up her phone and scrolls through the photos she took in the basement. The assisted living contract shows Mark's signature bold and confident, authorizing the disposal of his parents like unwanted furniture. The mortgage documents reveal how he's been liquidating their home equity to fund his affair. But it's the image of Grace's wedding ring that breaks her heart. 48 years of marriage reduced to an asset hidden in a gym bag, waiting to be converted into cash for Mark's new life. Another memory surfaces, this one more recent. Last month, Grace had asked Evelyn to help her organize family photos for what she called legacy albums collections. She wanted to leave for future grandchildren. They'd spent an afternoon on the sunroom floor, surrounded by decades of pictures. Grace's wedding day, radiant in white lace and pearls. Mark as a baby, then a toddler, then a gap-toothed boy holding his first trophy from Little League. Arthur teaching young Mark to drive in the parking lot behind the office, both of them grinning at the camera. "He was such a sweet child," Grace had said, holding a photo of 10-year-old Mark reading to her from a picture book. "He used to tell me bedtime stories when I was tired from work. Made up elaborate adventures about brave knights and wise queens. What happened to that boy? When did the child who told stories about heroes become a man who steals from his dying mother?" Grace had pulled out another photo, Mark's college graduation, Arthur bursting with pride as his son received his business degree. Arthur had such dreams for him. Wanted him to take the company to places we could never imagine. Instead, Mark is dismantling everything Arthur built, piece by piece, contract by contract. The third memory comes from Mark himself, though he probably doesn't remember sharing it. 2 years into their marriage, drunk on wine and sentiment after a particularly good day, he'd told her about the pressure of being Arthur Vance's only child. "Everyone expects me to be as good as he is," Mark had said, his words slightly slurred. "But Dad makes it look easy because he actually believes in what he's doing." How do you compete with someone who sees business as a calling instead of just a way to make money? Maybe that was when it started, the resentment that gradually poisoned Mark's love for his family. Maybe he'd spent so many years feeling inadequate that he'd convinced himself he deserved compensation for his suffering. Or maybe he'd always been capable of this kind of betrayal, and Evelyn had been too naive to see the warning signs. She thinks about the phone notification she'd glimpsed that first night. S.K. Sarah Kim, who wears Grace's jewelry and shares Mark's bed while Grace counts down her remaining days. Sarah is 28, Arthur's age when he started Vance Logistics with nothing but a used truck and determination. She's beautiful in the effortless way of youth, with glossy black hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never having experienced real loss. Does Sarah know about the assisted living contract? Does she understand that her designer clothes and expensive jewelry are paid for with money stolen from a dying woman? Or has Mark convinced her that Arthur and Grace are willingly funding their romance? Evelyn suspects Sarah knows exactly where the money comes from. The woman who accepted Grace's family heirloom necklace without question isn't naive about the source of her lifestyle. The bedroom clock reads 3:17 a.m. In a few hours, Grace will wake up for her morning medications. Arthur will shuffle to the kitchen for his coffee and newspaper. They'll begin another day trusting the son who's planning their abandonment. But tomorrow will be different because Evelyn won't be counting pills in ignorance anymore. Tomorrow, she starts fighting for what Arthur asked her to protect 15 years ago. She gathers the printed documents and slides them into a manila folder, along with the photographs from her phone. The evidence represents months of careful theft, but it also represents Mark's arrogance. He's been so confident in his control over the situation that he's kept detailed records of his own crimes. That arrogance will be his downfall. Evelyn opens her laptop and begins typing an email to the elder abuse hotline she researched yesterday. She attaches the clearest photos of the bank statements and assisted living contracts. In the message, she explains that she's documenting suspected financial exploitation of two elderly adults by their son, who has power of attorney. The email sends with a soft whoosh, disappearing into the digital landscape. Where it will trigger investigations and legal protections Arthur and Grace don't know they need. Next, she researches divorce attorneys who specialize in cases involving hidden assets. Mark thinks he's been clever about moving money, but forensic accountants can trace financial paths no matter how complicated the route. By dawn, she has appointments scheduled with 3 lawyers, a meeting arranged with a certified elder law specialist, and a file full of evidence that will strip Mark of his power over his family's future. As the first gray light of morning filters through the bedroom windows, Evelyn holds Arthur's Parker pen one more time. The gold surface has aged to a warm patina, but the weight remains solid, substantial, built to last. Integrity isn't a strategy, she whispers, remembering Arthur's words. It's an anchor. For 15 years, she's drifted in the wake of Mark's increasingly destructive decisions, trying to keep the peace while he dismantled everything his parents built. But no more. Today, she drops anchor and starts fighting for what's right. The war for Grace and Arthur's future begins now, and Evelyn has Arthur's pen, his words, and his faith in her promise to protect what matters most. Mark thinks he's already won, but he's never seen Evelyn when she stops trying to save a marriage and starts trying to save a family. Navy Pier stretches into Lake Michigan like a concrete finger pointing toward hope. Gray water crashes against the breakwall, sending spray high enough to mist the observation deck where Evelyn waits. The November wind cuts through her wool coat, but she doesn't move from the metal bench facing the lake. At precisely 2 p.m., a woman in a charcoal suit approaches. Victoria Chen, senior partner at Chen, Morrison & Associates, specializes in high-asset divorce cases involving financial fraud. Her silver hair is pulled back in an efficient bun, and her handshake is firm enough to crack bones. "Mrs. Vance? You sounded urgent on the phone." Evelyn slides a manila envelope across the wet picnic table. "My husband has been systematically stealing from his dying mother and elderly father. I have documentation." Victoria opens the envelope and examines the photographs Evelyn printed. Her expression doesn't change as she reviews bank statements, mortgage documents, and the assisted living contract. After 20 minutes, she looks up. "How did you obtain these records?" "My husband was careless. He left them where I could find them." Evelyn's voice is steadier than she feels. "Is what he's doing illegal?" "Elder financial abuse is a felony in Illinois. Your husband could face up to 7 years in prison." Victoria slides the photos back into the envelope. "But proving abuse requires more than suspicious documents. We need to demonstrate intent, pattern of behavior, and harm to the victims." "What kind of proof?" Victoria pulls out a digital recorder, no larger than a matchbook. "If your husband discusses his plans with you or his parents, record everything. Illinois is a one-party consent state. As long as you're part of the conversation, recording is legal. The tiny device feels heavy in Evelyn's palm. Recording her husband's voice feels like crossing a line she can never uncross. But then she thinks of Grace asking her to protect Arthur, and the weight becomes manageable. There's something else, Victoria continues. Your father-in-law gave you this. She slides a thumb drive across the table. He asked me to tell you he's been documenting everything for 2 years. Evelyn stares at the small device. Arthur knows? Mr. Vance contacted our office 6 months ago. He suspected his son was manipulating financial documents but couldn't prove it without help. Victoria's voice softens slightly. He's been playing confused to protect himself while gathering evidence. Every document your husband forced him to sign, every conversation about moving money, it's all documented. The revelation hits like a physical blow. Arthur isn't becoming senile. He's been conducting his own investigation, pretending to be vulnerable while building a case against his son. Why didn't he tell me? He needed someone on the inside who could act naturally around your husband. If you'd known Arthur was investigating, your behavior might have changed enough to make Mark suspicious. Victoria checks her watch. Mr. Vance will reveal his awareness at the right moment, but first we need to secure additional evidence. Over the next hour, Victoria outlines their strategy. Evelyn will continue documenting Mark's activities while Arthur maintains his confused elderly father routine. When they have sufficient evidence, they'll coordinate with prosecutors and adult protective services to remove Mark's power of attorney and secure Grace and Arthur's assets. What about Grace? How much does she know? She knows her son is stealing from her. She doesn't know the full extent yet, and we're trying to spare her that stress while she's fighting cancer. Victoria's expression hardens, but she's the one who suggested recording his conversations. She wants her husband protected, whatever the cost. The wind off Lake Michigan intensifies, sending whitecaps across the gray water. Evelyn pulls her coat tighter and studies the thumb drive Arthur gave her. 2 years of careful documentation while Mark thought he was manipulating a confused old man. How long do we have? Your husband plans to move both parents to assisted living within 2 weeks. Once they're there, it becomes much harder to reverse the financial damage he's done. Victoria stands, gathering her materials. We need everything documented and filed before then. After Victoria leaves, Evelyn remains on the pier for another hour. The lake stretches toward the horizon, its surface reflecting the gray afternoon sky like hammered metal. Chicago's skyline rises behind her, a monument to ambition and dreams built one steel beam at a time. Arthur's grandfather came to this city with nothing, built a small delivery business that grew into the logistics empire Mark now controls. 3 generations of careful work, honest dealing, and community trust, all of it threatened by one man's greed and entitlement. But Arthur hasn't given up. While Mark thought he was stealing from a helpless old man, Arthur was building the case that will destroy him. The next 72 hours blur together in a careful dance of deception. Evelyn continues her caregiving routine while the digital recorder captures Mark's increasingly careless comments. He brags about the investment opportunities he's found for Arthur's money. He complains about Grace's expensive treatments. He discusses timeline details for the assisted living transition with Sarah over dinner, apparently forgetting that Evelyn can hear their conversations through the kitchen doorway. Each recorded conversation adds another nail to the coffin of his defense. On Thursday evening, Arthur requests a meeting in his study. Evelyn finds him sitting behind his desk, but the confused elderly man routine is gone. His eyes are sharp, focused, angry. I want you to know how grateful I am, he says without preamble. Grace and I both. You could have walked away when this started getting complicated. This is my family too. Arthur nods, then opens his desk drawer and pulls out a second thumb drive. This one contains video recordings. My computer camera has been active for months, capturing Mark's visits when he thinks I'm too confused to understand what he's asking me to sign. The videos show Mark's manipulation in devastating detail. His impatient explanations of necessary financial changes. His frustrated responses when Arthur asks legitimate questions about the documents. His casual dismissal of Grace's need for ongoing medical care. The assisted living facility he chose can't provide cancer treatment, Arthur says quietly. He's essentially signing Grace's death warrant and calling it compassionate care. In the study's warm lamplight, surrounded by decades of family photographs and business awards, Evelyn sees Arthur clearly for the first time in months. Not as a confused elderly man requiring careful management, but as a strategic thinker who spent 50 years building a company and 2 years building the case that will save his family. What happens next? Arthur's smile is cold and sharp. Next week, Mark expects me to sign the final papers transferring my remaining assets to his control. Instead, I'm going to present him with a choice. Resign from the company and return everything he's stolen, or face federal charges for elder abuse and embezzlement. The plan is elegant in its simplicity. Mark will walk into what he thinks is a routine business meeting and discover that his victims have spent months preparing his downfall. Will he cooperate? Mark has always been a coward when confronted with real consequences. He'll take the deal. Arthur's voice carries no sadness, only cold determination. But if he doesn't, we'll destroy him in court. That weekend, Evelyn receives a call from Victoria Chen. Adult Protective Services has reviewed their evidence and issued emergency protective orders preventing Mark from accessing Arthur and Grace's finances. Forensic accountants are already tracing the money he's moved to hidden accounts. The net is closing around Mark's carefully constructed deception, but he doesn't know it yet. He continues planning his parents' disposal, confident in his control over their lives. Sunday evening, as Evelyn helps Grace organize her medications for the coming week, Grace speaks quietly. "I know what you've been doing, dear. Arthur told me about the recordings, the lawyers, all of it." Her hands shake slightly as she sorts the colorful pills. "I wanted to thank you for protecting us when we couldn't protect ourselves. You would have done the same for me." Grace sets down the pill bottle and looks directly at Evelyn. "When this is over, when Mark is gone, you'll stay with us, won't you? Arthur and we consider you more of a daughter than Mark ever was a son." The offer breaks Evelyn's heart and mends it simultaneously. For 16 years, she's felt like a guest in Mark's family, welcome as long as she didn't cause problems. Now Grace is offering her something she's never had: unconditional belonging. "I'll stay as long as you need me." That night, Mark receives a text message asking him to attend a special board meeting Tuesday morning. Final vote on succession planning, the message reads. He shows it to Evelyn over breakfast, excited about what he assumes will be his formal promotion to company leadership. "Dad's finally ready to step down completely," he says, buttering his toast with confident strokes. "About time. The company needs younger leadership, more aggressive growth strategies." Evelyn nods and makes appropriate responses while mentally counting the hours. Until Mark discovers that the only thing being voted on is his complete removal from the family business. Tuesday arrives gray and cold, with November wind rattling the windows like impatient fingers. Mark leaves early, wearing his best suit and carrying the briefcase that contains signed documents he believes will make him the undisputed head of Vance Logistics. Instead, he's walking into an ambush 15 months in the making. Evelyn watches his car disappear down their tree-lined street, then turns to help Grace and Arthur prepare for their own departure. They're meeting Victoria Chen at the courthouse to file additional protective orders and formally revoke all of Mark's financial authorizations. By the time Mark realizes what's happening, every avenue of escape will be sealed. The war for Arthur and Grace's future reaches its conclusion today, but Evelyn knows the hardest part still lies ahead. Destroying Mark's schemes was the easy part. Rebuilding trust in a family he betrayed will take years. But they have years now. Grace's cancer treatment will continue without financial stress. Arthur will die in his own home, surrounded by people who love him rather than warehoused in an institution that treats him like a burden. And Evelyn, for the first time in 16 years, will be part of a family that values her for who she is rather than what she does for them. The Vance Logistics boardroom occupies the entire 60th floor of a glass tower that pierces the Chicago sky like a steel needle. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer a panoramic view of the city Arthur built his empire to serve from the lakefront. Where cargo ships dock with goods from around the world, to the network of highways where Vance trucks carry commerce to every corner of the Midwest. Mark enters at exactly 9 a.m., his Italian leather briefcase containing contracts he believes will crown him as the undisputed head of his father's empire. He's dressed in his finest suit, navy wool with a subtle pinstripe that cost more than most people earn in a week. His confidence radiates across the mahogany conference table like heat from a furnace. "Good morning," he says to the assembled board members, his voice carrying the authority of someone who expects to be obeyed. "I appreciate everyone making time for this final vote." Arthur sits at the head of the table in his wheelchair, a blanket covering his legs. To Mark's eyes, his father looks frail, confused, dependent on others for basic decisions. The performance has been flawless for months. "Before we begin," Arthur says in a voice that trembles convincingly, "I'd like to introduce our guests." The boardroom doors open with heavy oak thuds. Victoria Chen enters first, followed by two forensic accountants from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Behind them, Agent David Morrison from the Elder Abuse Task Force takes position near the door. Mark's confident smile falters. "Dad, what's this about?" "We agreed this would be a family meeting." "It is a family meeting, son. We're here to discuss your future with this company." Arthur's voice suddenly loses its tremor, becoming sharp and clear. "Please, have a seat." The transformation in Arthur's demeanor is stunning. Gone is the confused elderly man who needed help understanding basic documents. In his place sits the strategic mind that built Vance Logistics from a single truck into a multi-billion-dollar operation. Mark remains standing, his hand gripping the back of a leather chair. "I don't understand what's happening here." Victoria Chen opens her briefcase and slides a thick manila folder across the table. "Mr. Vance, you're being presented with a choice. You can cooperate with our investigation and make full restitution for funds you've stolen from your parents. Or you can face federal charges for elder abuse, embezzlement, and fraud." The color drains from Mark's face as he opens the folder. Inside are copies of every document from his gym bag, along with bank statements. He's never seen before records Arthur has been keeping in secret accounts for 2 years. "This is impossible. Dad can barely remember what day it is. Your father has been documenting your theft for 24 months. Agent Morrison's voice cuts through the boardroom's marble silence. "Every forged signature, every redirected payment, every fraudulent contract. We have video recordings of you manipulating him into signing documents under false pretenses." Arthur reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small device, the same type of recorder Victoria had given Evelyn. "Including yesterday's conversation where you discussed moving your mother to substandard care so you could spend her medical fund on your girlfriend's lifestyle." Mark stumbles backward into his chair, the briefcase falling from his numb fingers. The contracts he thought would secure his future spill across the marble floor, useless papers that will never be signed. "You have 48 hours to return every dollar you've stolen," Victoria continues. "The mortgage fraud on your family home, the redirected Social Security payments, the medical charges you've billed to false accounts, all of it." "And if I refuse?" Agent Morrison steps forward. 7 years in federal prison for elder abuse. Additional charges for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Your assets will be frozen pending investigation, and your girlfriend will be questioned as a potential co-conspirator. The mention of Sarah makes Mark flinch. Whatever loyalty he feels toward her evaporates when faced with the possibility of criminal prosecution. "I want to speak to my lawyer." "You're free to contact legal representation," Victoria says. "But the evidence against you is overwhelming. Video recordings, financial forensics, witness testimony from your wife and parents. Your best option is cooperation." Arthur wheels his chair closer to the conference table, his eyes locked on his son's face. "You tried to steal my wife's dignity along with her money. You planned to warehouse us in a facility that couldn't provide the care Grace needs to survive. Mom's treatments aren't working. I was trying to make her final months more comfortable. By putting her somewhere that would hasten her death?" Arthur's voice rises with barely controlled fury. "By stealing her wedding ring while she fights cancer? By convincing me to sign away everything I've spent 50 years building?" Mark looks around the boardroom, searching for allies among the board members who've watched him grow up in the company. But every face reflects disgust, disappointment, betrayal. These are people who've worked with Arthur for decades, who built careers on the foundation of trust and integrity he established. "The board has voted unanimously to terminate your employment and remove you from all company positions," Arthur continues. "You'll receive final compensation according to your employment contract, but nothing more. You can't do this. I'm your son. You stopped being my son when you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. Arthur's words hit like physical blows. A son protects his family. A son honors his parents. You're just a thief who happens to share my DNA. Victoria slides another document across the table. This is a complete financial disclosure agreement. You'll list every account, every asset, every investment you've purchased with stolen funds. Failure to comply fully will void this arrangement and result in immediate prosecution. Mark's hands shake as he reviews the agreement. The terms are devastating but clear: return everything he's stolen. Accept permanent banishment from the company, submit to ongoing financial monitoring, or face federal prison. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? That's not our concern, Arthur says coldly. You made these choices. You live with the consequences. The signing takes 30 minutes. Mark's confident signature becomes increasingly shaky as he acknowledges each theft, each manipulation, each betrayal. With every page, he surrenders another piece of the future he thought he'd secured. When the documents are complete, Agent Morrison escorts Mark toward the elevator. At the doorway, Mark turns back toward his father. I'm sorry. Arthur doesn't respond. He sits motionless in his wheelchair, watching his only child disappear from his life forever. After the elevator doors close, Victoria begins outlining the financial recovery process. Frozen accounts will be liquidated, hidden assets will be seized, forged contracts will be voided. Grace and Arthur's security will be restored within weeks. But Arthur isn't listening to the legal details. He's staring out the windows at the city where he built everything that mattered to him. The logistics trucks moving goods through downtown traffic. The port facilities where cargo containers stack like building blocks. The office buildings where Vance employees work to support their families. All of it safe now from the son who would have dismantled it for personal profit. The boardroom empties gradually as members file out to manage the transition. Arthur remains in his wheelchair, watching Chicago wake up to another day of honest commerce and legitimate business. Victoria approaches his chair carefully. Are you all right, Mr. Vance? I raised that boy from nothing. Gave him everything I could. Taught him right from wrong. Arthur's voice carries the weight of 75 years of decisions. Where did I fail him? Sometimes people choose to be selfish regardless of how they're raised. That's not a reflection of your parenting. Arthur nods but doesn't seem convinced. In the space of 2 hours, he's protected his family's future and lost his son forever. Victory and grief occupy the same space in his chest. What happens now? Now you go home to Grace. You enjoy whatever time you have left together without worrying about money or security. Victoria packs her documents with efficient movements. And you let Mrs. Vance know that the board has approved her appointment as your permanent healthcare advocate and estate manager. The news about Evelyn brings the first smile to Arthur's face since the meeting began. After 16 years of treating her like hired help, his family can finally offer her the recognition she deserves. An hour later, Arthur sits in the passenger seat of Evelyn's car as they drive back to Oak Park. The November afternoon is crisp and bright, with winter sunlight streaming through bare tree branches. Grace waits at home with soup warming on the stove and medication organized for the next week of treatment. Mark is gone, banished from their lives like a cancer that's been successfully removed. The relief is overwhelming, but so is the sadness of losing someone they once loved. Do you think he'll try to contact us? Evelyn asks as they turn onto their tree-lined street. I don't know, but if he does, we won't be vulnerable anymore. Arthur looks at the house where Grace waits for them, safe now, protected, able to fight her illness without fighting her son. We have you watching out for us. That's all the security we need. The oak tree in their backyard stands silhouetted against the afternoon sky, its branches bare but strong, rooted deep enough to survive any storm. Like the family it shades, it endures because its foundation reaches down to bedrock that cannot be moved or stolen or sold. Mark thought he could uproot everything Arthur planted, but he underestimated the depth of love that holds a real family together. The ledger is balanced now. Justice has been served, and Grace and Arthur can spend whatever time remains to them surrounded by the peace they've earned through 50 years of building something worth protecting. Spring arrives early in Chicago, and with it comes the kind of morning Grace thought she might never see again. Sunlight streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Evelyn's new apartment overlooking Millennium Park, warming oak floors that gleam like honey. The apartment is smaller than the Oak Park house but filled with light in a way the old place never was. 6 months have passed since Mark's banishment from their lives. 6 months of Grace responding better to chemotherapy now that financial stress no longer compounds her physical battle. 6 months of Arthur regaining strength and clarity now that he doesn't have to pretend confusion to protect himself. 6 months of Evelyn discovering who she is when she's not walking on eggshells around a man who saw her as a burden. Evelyn sits at a minimalist desk by the window, opening mail that arrives in her name alone. Bank statements from accounts she controls. Insurance payments for work she's proud of. Bills for services she chose and utilities she uses as she sees fit. The envelope from her attorney contains the final divorce decree. After 16 years of marriage, her legal connection to Mark Vance no longer exists. She is officially free to build whatever future she chooses. The settlement was generous, considering Mark's circumstances. Arthur insisted that Evelyn receive compensation for 16 years of unpaid caregiving, plus her fair share of assets accumulated during the marriage. Even depleted by Mark's theft, the Vance family fortune provided enough to ensure Evelyn's financial independence. But the money, while welcome, isn't what fills her with satisfaction this morning. It's the knowledge that Grace and Arthur are thriving under care that comes from love rather than obligation. Her phone buzzes with a text from Grace: "Treatment went well today. Scans show continued improvement. Doctor says I might see Christmas after all." The message brings tears to Evelyn's eyes. Last November, Grace's oncologist had privately estimated 6 months. Today, that same doctor talks about yearly survival rates and long-term treatment plans. Medical science helped, but so did removing the stress of wondering whether her son was stealing her means of survival. Evelyn dresses carefully in a navy suit that fits her perfectly, not because Mark approved of the style, but because she chose it herself. Today marks the grand opening of the Vance Foundation Center for Elder Protection, a nonprofit organization funded by Arthur's grateful donation and Evelyn's determination to help other families facing what they survived. The center provides legal assistance, financial counseling, and advocacy services for seniors experiencing abuse from family members. In 6 months, they've helped 43 families document theft, reverse fraudulent contracts, and remove dangerous guardians. Every case reminds Evelyn how fortunate they were to catch Mark's scheme before it completely succeeded. At 10 a.m., she meets Arthur and Grace at the center's ribbon-cutting ceremony. Grace looks elegant in a silk scarf that frames her face, the same scarf she wore to last year's disastrous Thanksgiving dinner. But now it represents strength instead of disguise. Her hair has grown back thicker than before, silver white and styled in a way that makes her look distinguished rather than sick. Arthur uses a walking cane now but no longer needs the wheelchair that was part of his protective performance. His shoulders are straight, his eyes sharp with purpose. At 76, he's found new meaning in helping other families avoid the betrayal his son inflicted. "Are you ready for this?" he asks Evelyn as they approach the microphone set up for opening remarks. "More ready than I've ever been for anything." The crowd includes reporters, city officials, and families who've already benefited from the center's services. Evelyn recognizes faces from support groups, people who understand that elder abuse often comes from within families rather than from strangers. When someone you trust betrays that trust, Evelyn begins, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd, the damage goes deeper than financial loss. It breaks something fundamental about how you see the world. She speaks about Grace's courage in fighting cancer while her son stole her security. About Arthur's strategic patience in building the case that saved their family. About the importance of supporting elderly adults who often suffer in silence because they can't believe their own children would harm them. The Vance Foundation Center exists to remind seniors that they're not alone, that their voices matter, and that it's never too late to fight for what's right. After the ceremony, Evelyn returns to her apartment and finds an unexpected visitor waiting in the lobby. Mark sits in one of the leather chairs, looking older than his 48 years. His suit is wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his confident posture replaced by something that looks like defeat. "Hello, Evelyn." She considers calling security but decides to hear what he came to say. They move to a corner of the lobby where their conversation won't disturb other residents. I saw the news coverage about your center, he begins. It looks like important work. It is. Evelyn's voice is steady, neutral. She feels no anger toward Mark anymore, which surprises her. Just a kind of distant sadness for the man he might have been. I wanted to apologize, not because my lawyer thinks it would help I'm past legal consequences now, but because you deserved better than what I put you through. The apology comes 15 years too late, but Evelyn appreciates the acknowledgement. Thank you. How are you managing? Mark works as a logistics coordinator for a small freight company now, using skills learned in his father's business, but without the authority or prestige he once commanded. Sarah left him when the money disappeared, exactly as everyone predicted she would. I'm getting by, learning to live within my means. He manages a weak smile. Remember how we used to talk about simple pleasures? Coffee on Sunday mornings, walks through the park? Turns out those things matter more than I realized. They sit in silence for a moment, two people who once shared everything and now share nothing but history. How are my parents? Thriving. Grace's cancer is responding well to treatment. Arthur is mentoring young executives at the company. Evelyn chooses her words carefully. They're at peace. Mark nods, understanding that peace doesn't include room for him. I'm glad. They deserved better than what I gave them too. He stands to leave, then pauses. For what it's worth, you were always the best thing about our marriage. I just wasn't smart enough to appreciate what I had. After he's gone, Evelyn sits in the lobby thinking about the roads not taken, the choices that led them all to this place. Mark chose greed over family and lost everything that mattered. She chose loyalty over comfort and discovered strength she didn't know she possessed. That evening, she joins Grace and Arthur for dinner in their Oak Park home. The dining room feels different now, warmer, more welcoming, filled with conversation instead of tension. Grace moves around the kitchen with energy that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Arthur tells stories about his day at the office, engaged with business decisions rather than defending against theft. I have news, Grace announces as they settle at the table. The oncologist wants to discuss transitioning me to maintenance therapy. Not a cure, but management that could give me years instead of months. The news fills the room with quiet celebration. Years, enough time to see grandchildren if Mark ever finds peace and redemption. Enough time to enjoy the simple pleasures Evelyn fought to protect. After dinner, Evelyn helps with dishes while Arthur reads in his study. Grace moves carefully but purposefully, her hands steady as she handles the delicate china that survived Mark's attempt to liquidate their assets. I've been thinking about legacy, Grace says as they work. Not money or property, but the things that really matter. Values, memories, lessons learned. What kind of lessons? That love without boundaries becomes enabling. That trust without verification becomes vulnerability. Grace sets a plate in the drying rack with gentle precision. That sometimes protecting someone means fighting the people who claim to love them most. As the evening ends, Evelyn drives through neighborhoods where she and Mark once walked hand in hand, dreaming about futures that seemed guaranteed. The Oak Park streets look the same, but she sees them differently now, not as monuments to what she lost, but as foundations for what she built from the ruins. Her phone chimes with a text from Grace, "Thank you for giving us our lives back. Sleep well, daughter." Daughter. Not daughter-in-law, not caregiver, not the expensive nanny Mark once called her. Daughter, a title earned through love and loyalty rather than marriage and obligation. Evelyn parks outside her apartment building and looks up at the windows where her new life waits. Tomorrow will bring new families to help, new cases of elder abuse to investigate, new chances to turn betrayal into justice. But tonight, she sits in her car with tears of gratitude running down her cheeks. Holding her phone and the word that means she finally belongs somewhere without conditions or reservations. The oak tree in Grace and Arthur's backyard stands strong through another Chicago winter, its roots deep enough to anchor against any storm. Like the family it shelters, it endures because what matters most grows beneath the surface, out of sight but never out of mind. Life doesn't end just because it breaks once. What falls apart can be the very place where we learn to stand again. If this story gave even a small moment of strength to someone out there, then everything I went through means something today. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe, and share a piece of your own story in the comments below. Your words might become the seed of the next chapter we create together. Thank you for spending this time with me.